Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Surface Transforms PLC AGM Proceedings and Investor Presentation. For your information, throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab. Simply type the question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where appropriate to do so. These will be available via Investor Meet Company dashboard. Finally, we'd like to remind you that the presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I would now like to hand you over to David Bundred, Non-Exec Chair, Kevin Johnson, CEO, and Michael Cunningham, CFO of Surface Transforms PLC.
Thank you, Paul. It's David Bundred here. It's normal for the chairman to chair the AGM, but given the need for a physical AGM with only the quorum of 2 present, it made more sense to have the directors who live closest to the plant in the plant for the AGM, that being Kevin Johnson, our Chief Executive, and Michael Cunningham, the Chief Financial Officer. I am therefore going to hand the AGM over to Kevin as Chairman of the meeting. I will take no further part in the formal AGM and will rejoin when we come to Kevin's presentation. Over to you, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, David. Okay. In terms of the formal script, I'll just read through that and then we'll get on to the formal bit and the informal bit with the presentation in probably about 10 minutes or so. And it's worth noting we've got an hour today till 10:30 to complete the AGM, if not before. So it is now 9:32 and the quorum required for the company's articles of association is present. I would like to welcome you to this annual general meeting of Surface Transforms PLC. Before commencing the formal proceedings, I'd like to introduce you to my fellow director who is present here today in the room, which is Michael Cunningham. A notice to convene the meeting has been in your hands for the statutory period, and further copies are available on the company's website as required by the Articles of Association of the company. With your permission, I will take this notice as read. Okay. Resolution 1 is an ordinary resolution to receive the audited accounts of the company for the period ended 31st of December 2019 and the reports of the directors and auditors thereof. The number of proxy votes received in favour of this resolution is 59,375,828, including 91,863 giving the chair a discretion. And the number of proxy votes received against the resolution is 2,246. I now propose this resolution and the notice is passed as an ordinary resolution. I now ask that a shareholder seconds the resolution.
I second the resolution.
The resolution has been proposed and seconded, and I now put it to the meeting. All in favour? Is there anyone against the resolution? I declare the resolution carried. Resolution 2. Resolution 2 is an ordinary resolution to reappoint RSM UK Audit LLP as auditors of the company and to authorise the directors to fix their remuneration. The number of proxy votes received in favour of this resolution is 59,375,828, including 91,863 giving the chair a discretion. And there are 2,246 proxy votes against this resolution. I now propose that resolution as set out in the notice is passed as an ordinary resolution. I now ask that a shareholder seconds the resolution.
I second the resolution.
The resolution has been proposed and seconded, and I now put it to the meeting. All those in favour? Is there anyone against the resolution? I declare the resolution carried. Resolution 3. Resolution 3 is an ordinary resolution to re-elect myself. No, sorry, I have to hand over here, right? Okay, no, got it. Okay, Resolution 3 is an ordinary resolution to re-elect me as a director of the company. In accordance with the Articles of Association of the company, I am now required to retire by rotation and by being eligible, offer myself for re-election. I now ask Michael to take the chair.
Good morning. The number of proxy votes received in favour of this resolution is 59,373,754, including 91,863 giving the chair discretion. And the number of proxy votes received against this resolution is 2,246. I now propose that Resolution 3 in the notice is passed as an ordinary resolution. I now ask that a shareholder seconds the resolution.
I second the resolution.
The resolution has been proposed and seconded, and I now put it to the meeting. All those in favour? Is there anyone against the resolution? I declare the resolution carried, and I ask Kevin to resume the chair.
Thanks, Michael. Okay. Moving on to Resolution 4. Resolution 4 is an ordinary resolution to David Bunder as a director of the company. In accordance with the Articles of Association of the company, David is required to retire by rotation and, being eligible, offers himself for re-election. The number of proxy votes received in favour of this resolution is 42,601,978, including 91,863 giving the chair a discretion. And there are 2,246 proxy votes against the resolution. And I'll also note here that there were 16,773,850 withheld. Now, it's worth me making a comment here about the withheld votes there. When we first published the resolutions, there was a printing error on the first issue of the resolution notice, and where there was a box, there wasn't a box for Resolution 4 on the form. We then reissued the form with a box, as it was a printing error. However, some people had already completed their forms without that box, and therefore, if they haven't been able to vote on that resolution, we've assumed those votes would be withheld. So it's my belief that that's why we've got that inordinate number of withheld votes. Now, it doesn't really make a difference, but it's just worth noting that I don't believe there's an issue with anybody withholding their votes. I think it was just a mechanical error. Okay, I now propose that Resolution 4, as set out in the notice, is passed as an ordinary resolution. I now ask that a shareholder seconds the resolution.
I second the resolution.
The resolution has been proposed and seconded, and I now put it to the meeting. All those in favour? Is there anyone against the resolution? I declare the resolution carried. Resolution 5. Resolution 5 is an ordinary resolution to approve the granting of an authority pursuant to Section 551 of the Companies Act 2006 to the directors to allot relevant securities up to a maximum nominal amount of £515,276 and an additional authority to allot equity securities on a fully preemptive basis up to a maximum nominal amount of an additional £515,276. The text of this part of the resolution is set out in the notice convening this meeting, which, with your consent, I will take as read. The number of proxy votes received in favour of this resolution is 58,967,713, including 91,863 giving the chair a discretion. And the number of proxy votes received against this resolution is 410,361. I now propose that Resolution 5, as set out in the notice, is passed as an ordinary resolution. I now ask that a shareholder seconds the resolution.
I second the resolution.
The resolution has been proposed and seconded, and I now put it to the meeting. All those in favour? Is there anyone against the resolution? I declare the resolution carried. Resolution 6. Resolution 6 is a special resolution to approve the granting of an authority pursuant to Section 570 of the Companies Act 2006 to the directors to allot equity securities. The grant of authority pursuant to Section 570 of the Companies Act 2006 shall be limited to the circumstances set out in Resolution 6 in the notice. The text of this part of the resolution is set out in the notice convening this meeting, which, with your consent, I will take as read. The number of proxy votes received in favour of this resolution is 58,693,898, including 91,863 giving the chair discretion, and the number of proxy votes received against this resolution is 679,601. I now propose that Resolution 6, as set out in the notice, is passed as a special resolution. I now ask that a shareholder seconds the resolution.
I second the resolution.
The resolution has been proposed and seconded, and I now put it to the meeting. All those in favour? Is there anyone against the resolution? I declare the resolution carried. Now, I think that concludes all the resolutions we have for today. And if there is any other business, I propose we close the formal part of the AGM and then move on to the presentation. Good. All right. Now for the presentation, I'm going to take questions at the end, which you can type in as you were reminded at the start. So I'll try and whiz through this as quickly as I can, taking care where I think it's important we give you the right messages, and then David will chair the Q&A session at the end. Okay. I've got the usual disclaimer, which I will just move straight on from, but it'll be there as part of the presentation when it's published. Now, it's just worth talking a little bit about at the start. I won't spend too much time on this slide, but just talking about customer and shareholder value and the position of the company in terms of delivering on that value. The key ones, as we've always said, is price, and we believe we're competitive with good margins on product. We know we have a superior technology to our competitors, in particular with certain attributes to do with heat management and life. Supply chain is very important to our customers, and we've worked hard on our supply chain. We are a credible alternative to the incumbent competitor, and we have a fully independent supply chain, which is very important to some of our customers. The next one on the list I'll draw your attention to is capacity. It's incredibly important that we can provide capacity. We've been working hard to provide that capacity, and we have the capacity for circa 16.5 million per year, and that's installed in the site. For those of you who've been to the site, is expandable up to the addressable market, or it's not even that now, it's the pipeline of contracts we see coming through, up to 50 million per year. And the last two on that slide regarding quality, it's important we have our quality certifications for the industry, which we've had for a number of years. And we are active in all the key markets, which principally for us are the UK, Germany, and the USA. And we have obviously our headquarters in the UK in Liverpool, and we have a small sales office in Germany. Now, all of that really is what are we doing it for? We see the value in this business and for shareholders and the investment proposition of where we are today, where we had sales. I think we just published our half-year numbers of just shy of 1 million at 900,000, and for the truncated year up to 2019 was 1.5 million for the 7 months. We'll talk about it in a bit more detail about how we see our current contracts moving us through cash generation and profitability towards 6 million, and that's in the context of this contract pipeline that we see over the next 5 years of 50 million. And of course, that's in the context of the potential market for ceramic brakes, which I've talked about in the past, being circa 2 billion per annum. So it's a significant market for us. Now, I'd like to move on now to talking about the revenue roadmap and how we see those contracts we've been announcing over the last sort of year, 2 years, and how they build up, and what's important features about those for the business as we go forward. And I'll start with 2020. Something we don't talk about very often, but it happens every day, all the time, is our near OEM customers and retrofit customers and supplying product to those markets and customers. This year, we'll have a revenue of at least 1.3, maybe a little more per annum. And on top of that, we also have our Valkyrie contract, which is worth 1 million per annum. We've seen that be delayed a couple of times, but we're expecting that to come through for a full year in 2021. And we're expecting some revenues this year, just towards the back end, which are either development or start of production revenues. But it'll make a contribution to this year, but it's really about next year and the year after for the Valkyrie contract. And then continuing the theme with 2020, we announced last year the contract with OEM 5, and we've been working through development through the year, and there is some development revenue that is coming through. We also announced quite recently the new contract, or we announced 2 contracts with Koenigsegg, but the new one for the Gamera and the previous one for the Jesco, and we've been receiving development revenue for those 2 contracts coming through in 2020. And there's also OEM 6 contract, which we announced a year ago, where we would expect to make some contribution to the business in terms of revenue this year, with startup production further out for that contract, which I'll come on to. And it's really that introduction of the Valkyrie, the message here, that takes us through cash break even. And as we move through cash break even, that takes us into 2021, where we would see our near OEM and retrofit revenues recover from 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic. And they're usually about 2 million per year. The Valkyrie would be at circa 1 million. And we would, in addition to that, we would still have our revenues from development from OEM 5, and it starts production for that contract towards the end of the year. So we would see a contribution from OEM 5 in terms of series revenue Now it's worth 1.8 million per annum, so we won't see that kind of revenue in 2021, but that's the recurring revenue going forward. And we would still receive some revenue from Koenigsegg and some revenue from OEM6 for development. And if you add those up, I think our revenues come to circa about 4 million, just over. And that's when we talk about the addition of OEM5 contract and the series production takes us through into cash generation in 2021. And moving into 2022, again, we have the recurring revenue with our near OEMs and retrofit. We have the remainder of our Valkyrie contract happening in 22, and we have a full year now with our OEM5 contract worth 1.8 million. And also in that year, we would then expect to see Koenigsegg revenues come in with the Chimera. And if we add those contracts up and the development revenues at the bottom there, they come to just shy of 6 million, somewhere between 5.5 to 6 million. And that's where we see our the company turn into profitability from our existing contracts. I should then point out that we don't talk about the revenues for OEM6 contract yet, because we see that entering series sometime after 2022, perhaps in 2023. And that's been delayed again due to the pandemic in terms of the introduction with OEM6, but it is there in the background. Now, another feature I want to point out here is that if we talk about all these contracts, a feature of this business is their recurring revenues for multiple years, so they're multi-year contracts. But it's worth noting when those multi-year contracts finish, they have quite a lifespan, some of them. Obviously, Valkyrie is quite a special addition, so that finishes in 2022. But in terms of the remainder of the contracts, you can see they go on for quite a few years, 2026 through to 2029 with recurring revenues. Now, looking a little bit forward beyond what our current contract situations are, we do see a prospective contract pipeline of circa 50 million by 2025. I've tried to highlight a little bit of where that demand might be coming from in the right-hand side of this slide, with OEM 1, 5, and 6 having demand for future models. And there's also significant demand from other OEMs that we haven't mentioned on the slide here with current contracts. But we see that happening through the next 5 years. Now, I can move on now to talking about what the company is doing in terms of the company activities and operational activities to support those contracts and to support the business and the growth of the business. First one I'd like to talk about is the product. And it's here that I'll talk to you about OEM3. OEM3 sort of bucks the trend in terms of what our policies are these days in talking about contracts. We only talk about business that we've won, but OEM3 has got a bit of a legacy to it, so it's worth saying that we're happy with the progress made with OEM3, and particularly with the environmental salt spray testing. We have an enhanced product, and it's really about now trying to integrate that product into what are the potential platforms OEM3 have going forward. And there is always an opportunity for us to optimize that as we integrate it into those potential platforms. So we're in a position now where we are talking to OEM3 about where that can fit and on which nominations and contracts it could go on in the future. Then move on to price. Is that another key requirement for the company? We put this graph up regularly. It hasn't changed, I'm pleased to say. We understand our customers' pricing and the elasticity of that pricing very, very well for volumes. We've worked hard on our cost reduction, so we think we know now that we have good margins. And our cost reduction program that we'd laid out is being delivered with the OEM Cell 1 being installed. And we also have future plans for cost reduction that will see us towards our target cost and pricing, which we believe will be in the marketplace as the market develops into the much higher volumes. So we feel we're in good shape with our price. Now, just moving on to capacity. I talked earlier on about having a capacity within the factory of 16.5 million. That's split between 2 cells. We talk about the small volume cell, small volume production cell, the SVP. You'll be able to see it there from the aerial view. The smaller rectangular box or the square box is our small volume cell. That can generate revenues up to about £4.5 million per annum, and supports a lot of that business for near OEM retrofits and will support Valkyrie and the like. Our OEM cell supports the new contracts I've been talking about, for example, with OEM 5 and OEM 6, and the development of that cell has progressed along track. It's had some issues, I would say, we've experienced through COVID with some of the supplier engineering support, where we've been able to get people on site during lockdown. That's now been alleviated. And we expect that cell, some of the furnaces are now making contributions to production. The CNC machines are also supporting production. So it is getting very close to being complete. And it will allow us to have a capacity of £12 million per annum. Now that remains, as I say, that cell capacity remains on track in terms of meeting our customer contracts, in particular OEM 5 and the Gamera. We're very happy with how that's progressing. And it's worth then pointing out that OEM cell 1 can be replicated. If any of you have been here or if you've heard me talk about this before, we've designed the cell to be modular. The footprint of the facility allows us to put multiple modules down, and we can put enough capacity in that it should be able to address our prospective contract pipeline of 50 million over the next 5 years. And again, just to mention the cost of a cell. The cost of a cell we think is in the region of 10 million, and there's about an 18-month payback on that investment. Briefly on quality and the environment. As I've said earlier, it's incredibly important we have our certification for the industry, and that's something called IATF 16949. I'm pleased to say that we've just gone through our audit, and that's gone very, very well. And so we continue to maintain our certifications for the industry. And we were also able to add to that the environmental 14001, and in particular to operate with the new capacity, it was important to get our environmental permit, and that's been received and allows us to operate as we would normally. On location, it's a little bit of an update here on our German location. We plan to relocate the German office to the region in Germany which has the most OEMs. That's typically southern Germany, in the regions of Munich, Stuttgart, that kind of area. And that's part of our planning really to mitigate any Brexit risks. We're expecting to, as we relocate, include a small warehouse there that if we need to, can carry some buffer stock should there be any disruption with the frictionless borders that we enjoy today and may be disrupted. So we will mitigate that by having a small warehouse in the area of the OEMs. Just touching on supply chain, there was a task which has been completed now for quite a little while to allow us to have dual sourcing for our raw materials. That's been in place and is working well. And we are working on other strengthening aspects of our supply chain, in particular for some of the metal parts. And that's continuing very, very well. We're very happy where we're going with that. But that's an ongoing that's an ongoing program, as cost reduction would be, where we have plans to improve that as we go with our existing and potentially new supplier base. Now, I just put all that's the day-to-day operational activities, if you like. I thought it would be useful to talk about the impact of COVID and how we've been coping with that. COVID-19 has obviously had a wide-ranging impact across in the entire world. I'm pleased to say that we've remained operational throughout. Our revenues, after we looked at the COVID scenario, are on track. So our half-year revenue is exactly where we would like it to be, if not slightly ahead. We have seen a delay from our customers, in particular the Valkyrie, where they were in lockdown for a period, and that's provided a delay, if you like, to the start of production. And we've also seen, although all of our customers are now back and working on their programs, some of the SOPs for the future programs have moved slightly as well. We instigated a cost reduction program in the region of 500,000 to 600,000. Part of that's on track. We are utilising some of the furlough scheme, even though we've maintained operations and been able to deliver to what our customers have been asking us for. We have furloughed some staff, and we continue to manage our staffing with the furlough scheme that is in place. But it's important to note that in terms of our engineering, we've been trying to maintain the engineering, because the engineering is integral to delivering to our future contracts that we already have in place with Gamera, OEM 5 and OEM 6. We also completed the fundraising, which we thank all of our shareholders for. Once we completed all of that fundraising, including the open offer, which was significantly oversubscribed. We raised 2.25 million net of fees. And the reason for doing that fundraising was to mitigate any worst case risks from COVID-19. If we don't see if you like, a rapid recovery, or we see a slow recovery, we feel like the fundraising we did now puts us in good, strong shape on the balance sheet to weather that storm. Now, then looking at the outlook for 2020 and 2021. As I say, the actions we took during the year so far have allowed us to mitigate a significant risk of COVID-19, and we continue to review that regularly and try and understand how we should be working and progressing to mitigate that risk as it develops. And that's an ongoing challenge for us, but we feel like we're managing it well. And we're maintaining the schedule for ramp up for current contracts. So although I talked a little bit earlier about some of the future contracts, SLPs having moved, that's not the case for OEM 5 or Gamera. So we need to maintain that momentum we've been building and continue that through 2020 and 21. And alongside that, although some of the SLPs have moved for those pipeline of contracts, some of them haven't. And we continue to work very hard on completing nomination processes for new OEM contracts in 2020. And that hopefully gives you a bit more detail about how the business has been progressing, where we see ourselves. If I could just summarize that for everybody now. First of all, we believe we still have an exciting investment opportunity with a strong ST position in this potential £2 billion market per annum. We have a prospective contract pipeline of 50 million over the next 5 years, and that covers OEMs 1, 3, 5, 6, Koenigsegg, and also new OEMs that we haven't mentioned in the past. Hopefully I've explained the revenue roadmap that we have in place, and that takes us through cash generation in 21 and profitability in 22. It's also worth noting those are multi-year recurring revenue contracts with OEM 5, 6, and Koenigsegg. And we obviously have our recurring revenue with the near OEMs and retrofit customers, which is very welcome as well. And then on the operational side, that continues to advance. Our product application engineering is progressing with OEMs. I've mentioned where we are with OEM 3. We feel like that's progressing as well. Price and margin is well understood. Capacity is coming on stream from our new cell. Furnaces are contributing, as are the CNC machines. Our supply chain is in good shape, and we're strengthening that. The COVID-19 backdrop to us does pose risks, but we are managing those risks and mitigating those risks on a daily basis. And as I say, in terms of our engineering work, it's about delivering to current contracts and completing the nomination requirements for new OEM contracts in 2020. So just as a final summary comment, really, we're well funded to deliver on all of our contracts we have in place and our contract pipeline. And I thank you for listening.
That's great. David, Kevin, Michael, thank you very much for running through the AGM and also the presentation today. Ladies and gentlemen, please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab. But just while I'll give the company a few moments to review those investor questions submitted already, I'd like to remind you that a recording of the presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. Lastly, before I hand back to the Surface Transport team, I'd like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company. Immediately after the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. David, I know I haven't given you and the team a lot of time to review the questions submitted today, but I wanted to hand back to you to respond to those where it's appropriate to do so. Perhaps we could start with the pre-submitted questions from investors. And I appreciate we've probably covered some of these off in the presentation itself, but could I ask you to read out the question and say it's from who it's from in the case of the live questions themselves. Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you, Paul, and thank you to Kevin for the presentation. As Paul has said, there have been a few questions in advance. I don't know who they're from, by the way. We do have names for the live ones, but not for the historic ones. I'm going to group some of the at least two of the questions that have been submitted in advance as they relate to customer and customer situations, and it's going to give us the opportunity to repeat our policy on potential customers and potential contracts. The questions are, firstly, can the company rule out BMW as a potential client, given the Brembo linkages And if not, why might they, presumably BMW, be interested in seeking a second supplier? And the second question is a different customer and different customer base, but it's a customer. Is the first mainstream EV client more likely to come from China or the US? In response, as it happens to the electric vehicle question, I think our first mainstream electric vehicle client was the Chinese-backed Koenigsegg Gamera. Do not underestimate the combination of Koenigsegg's technical brilliance and Chinese Evergrande deep pockets. However, our response to the spirit of both these questions is to remind shareholders that some time ago we said that, with the single exception of OEM3, which we are going to talk about separately, we've switched from speculating to only talking about contracts that we've won when we've won them. We've learned the hard way that there are too many variables that we don't control to enable us to speculate, to forecast on who and when named customers will contract with us. And furthermore, we have wondered if our previous public speculation on potential wins has been telling our competitor where to attack us. Either way, fact is, we no longer speculate or communicate customer details. So I'm sorry, but in respect to those two questions, we're not going to speculate or comment on BMW, Chinese or American electric cars or anything else. But what I can say in response to the question, big picture, is that really would be simpler to give you a short list of who is not testing our product. The length of the list is a serious resource challenge for us. And we can also say that all, and I did say all these tests are going well, and we expect to announce wins in the current financial year. Hopefully that responds to those two questions, but notwithstanding the generic point, we do understand, as Kevin said in his presentation, that because some time ago we started talking about OEM3, shareholders legitimately want to know where we are with them. We've had a question in advance for that. I think Kevin may have answered it, but I'm going to answer it anyway, ask him to answer it again. And I'm also going to tie this up with another question that's been submitted by Simon T. The first one is, Kevin, at the risk of pouring salt onto open wounds, what assurances can the board provide to persuade us that OEM3 is not playing, it says silly bummers, but I know what he means.
Yeah.
To help improve their present supplier. Over to you, Kevin.
Yeah, well, to answer that question, I think we've said all along that to have a single source for a component on a car is practically unheard of for an automotive company, vehicle manufacturer. It presents massive risks, and if that needed to be illustrated, that really has been illustrated with the COVID-19 pandemic. Our competitor lives in northern Italy. I know they had a significant shutdown and lockdown during that period. So I can only say that OEM3's desire to have a alternative supply and a competitive position is sincere and has been borne out by current events in 2020. Now, they also recognise that bringing on a competitor will benefit them financially as well. We understand pricing, we understand the costs very, very well. So do they. So it's a win-win for them. So there's absolutely no strategic need for them to go playing around with trying to suggest they're bringing this on board and not doing so. So I think the question for us has always been, they have a set of requirements that they want us to fulfill, and they will not compromise on that just to bring on a second source. So I want to reiterate that, as much as the desire is to bring on an alternative, they have their requirements, and it's up to the supplier to meet those requirements. And they're spending a lot of money trying to do this as well. It's worth noting that the investment they make is not trivial, and so therefore they are always looking to try and justify that investment, and it isn't just to play us off against our competitor.
Kevin, I'm going to take a question as well on OEM3. We can sort of OEM3 off. It's from Simon T, who writes, your answer on OEM3 suggested that you are now talking to them about integrating into their platforms. You imply, but do not say, that the salt spray test is passed. In a generic sense, is that true? And then, well, I can answer the last one, that part of that. Would you say that you're in the parts box? I can say we're not in their parts box yet. But Kevin, can you answer we're talking about integrating into their platforms and imply the salt spray test is passed?
Yeah, to answer that, you're right. I didn't say we passed the test. It wasn't fully intentional on that. But where we are is we've worked very hard on improving our product in that environmental test, and we're now very confident that we have a product that delivers the requirements. However, you never know that until you do it for real with the particular application. So what tends to happen is you have to demonstrate some kind of capability, which we've been working hard to do, and it's taken us a long time, admittedly, to get there. But we feel like we are. And then you have to do the work on a particular platform application. So to put that into more detailed terms, we picked a benchmark sizing of disk to run all of our tests on that we do on Dynamometer. That sizing isn't necessarily the size of disk and product that would go on the particular car that they're interested in, but they want to know that can be achieved. Where we are now is when you start talking about particular platforms and particular programs, you'll then start running that test on that particular design size of disk. So the requirement is to pass the test on the exact application, and that's what we're working on now.
Okay, there's a couple of questions on Tesla, but let me just deal with one from Harry O, who's asked the easiest question of the lot. What is SOP? Sincere apologies for use of acronyms. SOP is start of production. We're as guilty as everybody else in assuming that everyone understands the acronyms we use.
Yeah.
Right. There's a question from Philip S, which I will answer because I'm going to say I'm not telling you. And there's a question, if you could just look at it, Kevin, from Roger H, both on Tesla. Let me deal first with the Philip S question. I don't know, Philip, you're a lawyer, but it's a question written by a lawyer. Please, can you tell me whether or not any person or organization connected in any way with the company Surface Transforms PLC has had any contact with any person or organization connected in any way with Tesla? Well, the answer to that is, of course we have. We talk to everybody. We talk to people who are testing our products and people who aren't testing our products. And that's not really the question I think you're asking. I mean, yes, we're talking to them. But we're not prepared to comment on, as I said before, speculate on how well we are doing. Frankly, we've found the hard way. It doesn't pay to speculate. So yes, we're talking to them, but we're not going to say anything meaningfully more about the program. However, Roger H, which I'm going to ask you to answer, Kevin, is asking a generic question, which is a very fair question. Do we know what type and whose equipment Tesla fit? Does this type of vehicle affect the market size and plans? So that's a generic question, which you can answer, Kevin.
Yeah, sure. Yes. Well, putting it simply, Tesla don't fit a ceramic brake today in their series production. So they're only on iron brakes. So to answer your question, then to say, if they were to adopt a ceramic brake, then that would change the size of the market and the plans within that marketplace. And we've made no secret of the fact that we believe electric vehicles are very good for ceramics. And I don't mean just ST. I just mean ceramics as a technology. Just putting it into context, electric vehicles, lightweighting will become a significant part of electric vehicles. Probably already is, in fact, a significant part for electric vehicles. And as you know, ceramics offer a significant weight saving. 25 kilos typically on a big, fast, heavy car, which if you engineer it in could be multiplied up to 100 kilos if you engineer it through the uprights and the chassis. So there are other aspects where we know that the brakes for electric vehicles, because they have assisted electric motors that do some of the braking, don't get used as much. And so having corrosion on the brakes because they're not being used and might seize up is also an issue for an iron brake where it isn't for a ceramic brake. On top of that, you've then got the dust and particulates and the environmental factors that you have to consider, which currently are being focused on emissions from the powertrain, the engine. But obviously for electric vehicles, the biggest particulate emission would be brake dust, brake pad dust, and ceramics again make a significant reduction on brake pad dust. So there's a real driver for the market to move towards reducing brake pad dust in the future. And then you've got the range of the car as well for an electric vehicle. If you can take weight out, you can improve the range. And then the overall cost of ownership comes into play, where the end user wants to be able to have the car with brakes that last longer, require less servicing, less replacement, less labour costs, and so forth. So yes, Tesla don't have any right now. If they were to take ceramics, it would be a significant change from electric vehicles.
But the bottom line is, across the board, electric vehicles are very, very good news for carbon ceramic brakes.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's change the subject. Nicholas M has written a question. The last R&S had a title relating to new equipment. Can we have the details, please? I've just had a look at the R&S, and yeah, it was a little bit misleading when I look at it. The new capital equipment should have really, it relates to cell 1. I think Kevin dealt with that, but I don't know if you want to add anything, Kevin, on just repeat, presumably.
Yeah, I mean,
new equipment other than cell 1. That's the point.
Yeah, I suppose the word new means new as, and it's in our plans and we're using it rather than a new piece of equipment or new process piece of equipment that we might need. So, in terms of, I've always said all along that 70-80% of the cell is really furnaces based, and we're very happy with the furnaces we've now got. They're making contributions to production because they also offer cost savings, which we're utilizing for our small volume customers as well. So they're in place. As I said earlier, the machining centers are up and running and being used as well. And where we need to, we can flex capacity and use those as part of our day-to-day stuff. And we are. There are a few other ancillary bits of kit that are coming on stream. So those are happening through the remainder of this year. Early part of Q4 will be when it's all done, and we'll be in good shape.
Okay. Where are we? The next there's a next question from Jeff J, which is about the size of the market, Kevin, the 2 billion. Where do we get the 2 billion from? The question is, what is the approximate price range for this product? How do you expect pricing to evolve? And what is the basis for the 2 billion potential market estimate?
Sure. Okay, I won't answer it in that order, but I'll start with the estimate first, because then I think it leads on to the answers for the other questions. So when we define the £2 billion market, we define that by saying we've looked at cars above £50,000 to £75,000 will probably adopt the ceramics on their main braking axle, so on 2 corners. And then cars above £75,000 retail price will adopt it on all 4 corners of the car, so both axles. And when you add up the number of new cars produced in those 2 price ranges, you can add those and multiply one by 2 and the other one by 4. You end up getting, and we're using a number here, which is £500 a disc for the future. We don't sell a disc for that price today. So when you multiply that up, it comes to 4 million discs a year. Multiply that up by 500 is where we get the potential market of 2 billion. I should put that in context. 4 million rotors, I think I worked it out, is still less than 2 to 3% of the entire production of brake discs produced for cars in the world today. So it is still a small niche, but nonetheless a very attractive £2 billion niche that we want to develop into further and further. So that's the first point. The second point, how do we expect the pricing to evolve? Well, we've had some very good guidance from customers, and that £500 isn't plucked from the air. Although we came up with that number ourselves as future pricing, our customers have targets for pricing as well, and they seem to be aligned with what our expectations were. So that's how we expect the pricing to evolve. It will be volume related, and we have, with lots of our customers already, volume matrices which cover pricing as volumes increase. So that's where we expect to evolve. And you should consider the adoption of ceramic brakes a bit like an alloy wheel. Alloy wheels, when they started out and have really progressed through price and volume. And it's really that decision about whether you put an alloy wheel or whether you put a ceramic brake on to get all the benefits of lightweighting and so forth for the car. Just scroll back up a second so I can make sure I've answered all the questions.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think you've answered that question, Kevin, but can we just overlap it with a question from Leo H? That says, I understand your product is both superior and sold at a lower price than the competition. I don't actually think that's true, as it happens. We could sell at a lower price, but we don't. Yeah. How do manufacturing costs compare? Do you want to answer that, even if we don't really know the answer?
You're right. I mean, I mean, whether we sell at a lower price than our competitors, I think that's probably being driven by OEM spares pricing versus our retrofit pricing, if that makes sense. So, you know, that's probably where that's coming from. But you're right, for OEM supply, I don't think we're actually selling it at a lower price. Well, I know we're not selling at a lower price because that's not our intention, because we have a superior product as well. And that superior product relates to the manufacturing. And then if you talk about the manufacturing costs, fundamentally, our manufacturing costs, there are only a limited number of inputs into the cost of manufacture. And they're very similar although the technologies end up with very different product technologies, they're very similar inputs. And they really go by power. Power is one of our biggest inputs, as it is to manufacture any ceramic break. So that's the first one. Machining. This material is very hard. So machining and the tooling costs to do the machining is probably up there as a significant cost. The raw materials, the fiber. Now that fiber is the same whether you chop it up or have it as long fibers for ourselves. So that's the other input. Labor is not that relevant to this. It's quite a small percentage of the overall costs. And then you've got the other hardware that goes into the disc assembly. And those are, if you like, from the supply chain, are well understood, and they're the same for both technologies. So when we talk about being competitive, I don't think I talk about being better than our competitor for the inputs. Where I do think we have a competitive advantage is on the cost of capital for the investment in equipment. I think I'm aware that the cost to build capacity for our competitor's product is significantly higher than ours. So we do have an advantage for that input in the cost of capital. And the other advantage we think we have is the cost of tooling. By tooling, I don't mean the machine tools that sculpt and wear away the disc to the shape we want. I mean molding tools that you would use to create the overall shape for our competitors we don't need. So there's no a significant amortization of tooling required as an upfront investment between ourselves and
Kevin, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a follow-on question from Leo H.
Okay.
Towards the bottom, on the same theme, but slightly.
Yeah.
How much scope do you see for manufacturing costs to fall as scale is increased, both in the short and long term? How much development is required to achieve these savings? How do these manufacturing cost reductions in the short, medium term align with the volume discounts negotiated by OEMs? Okay,
I'll try and work my way through it. The first one, how much scope do you see for manufacturers to fall as scale has increased? You know, I'm going to answer that with that actually is more dependent on the application. And why I say that, we've got our cost reduction program in place for the next phase, and we can see significant cost reductions. That there's no doubt. But actually, there's a much bigger lever to have cost reductions than just us working away at making more efficient processes. And that's being smart about the sizing of the disc. One of the advantages of our material and our material design over our competitors is that it, as we've said in the past, it can either run cooler and so in terms of the temperature that the disc might operate on the car, we can run 150 to 200 degrees cooler, and that might be advantageous for performance cars. But as you move through the cars that it's applicable to, that probably isn't the driver. The driver becomes more cost and materials and everything else. And this is where we can size our brakes smaller and maintain performance. And sizing and volume is a cube equation. So there are three dimensions to size. There is the XYZ plane, or the depth, the thickness, and the length. And so this is a very sensitive number to our cost to manufacture. So if we can shrink the size of our disc, that is by far the most significant way to reduce our cost to manufacture, and it is an incredibly sensitive number. So to answer your questions, how far can they fall? If we can shrink the size of the disc, they can fall significantly. Let me just have a quick look and say now the development cost to do that. Obviously, just linking those two things together in terms of development costs. If we're looking to develop the processes and make them more efficient, there is some development costs, but we don't see that being any more significant than what we're spending today in terms of our development costs. Now, to make a different size isn't that big a development for us. So one of the benefits, again, is we make a generic blank, and we can cut that blank to any size we want. As we said, there's no tooling. So In terms of the development cost to make a smaller size, there are very few development costs associated with that, so that's another advantage. And the last bit, in the medium and short term, how do we manufacturing cost reductions in the short to medium term line with the volume discounts negotiated? Well, we've already, to answer that question, I just want to be careful. We always plan ahead. So what I don't want to do is give away, if one of our customers was to listen to this, to say, well, we've already built in cost reductions that are representative of future margins. So that's not the case, but we are very comfortable with our cost reduction program being aligned to the volume curve and pricing curves that we've agreed with our customers, and it maintains a very good margin.
Yeah, I would actually say we're ahead of the game there.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of the time. Actually, I'll take a very quick question from John PF. That's quite an easy question to answer. He says, you alluded to EV brakes, but also electric vehicle brakes, but also mentioned other uses for ceramics in vehicles. Would there be a plan to manufacture these additional items? The answer is absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's been hard enough working at doing what we're doing without going into things we don't understand.
Yeah.
So I'll take that one. There's another question, OEM3, which, to be honest, I honestly think we've answered OEM3. I think we've answered Tesla. I'm conscious of the time. We've only got a few minutes left. Paul, should I hand over to you, or do you want me to?
David, no, thank you very much, and guys, thank you very much for the comprehensive answer to the questions. I think you've pretty much addressed all those questions we've had from investors today. Of course, the company will review all questions that have been submitted by investors, and we'll publish those back out on the Investor Meet Company platform. David, perhaps if I could just give you a couple of seconds just to wrap up, after which I'll redirect investors for the opportunity to provide feedback.
Yeah, it's quite easy to wrap up, actually, because what I want to just do is reiterate the last sentence of my statement in the last RNS. Kevin has taken you through the contracted volumes, and it's important to re-emphasize strongly that everything we've said about break-even, about profitability, about the revenue stream, it's all based on contracts. We no longer speculate. And we're on track to reach positive cash generation in 21, to report a profit before tax in 22, and we still expect to make new further contracts in 2020, and that's really my summary of today. What I want to do, though, is I want to thank all the shareholders for taking part in what is for us a first. I don't know if it's a first for you guys and ladies. I want to thank Kevin and Michael, particularly Kevin, for his work. I want to thank Paul Brotherhood and Investor Meet Company for facilitating that. Thank you very much. As I said, this will stay online. Over to you, Paul.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the Surface Transport team for updating investors today, especially given the COVID restrictions around physically attending an AGM. I'm sure all your shareholders and investors will be very appreciative of your time and having the opportunity to directly engage. Could I ask investors not to close this session, as you'll automatically be redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback. If you've accessed this meeting from our website, the feedback page will appear in front of you. If you've accessed from the link sent to you via the email, you'll be asked to log in to submit your feedback. And just on behalf of Surface Transforms Investor Meet Company, thank you very much for attending today's presentation. That today concludes the meeting. Thank you indeed.